So today we're going to be looking at watercolors and a way to apply those to paper. So you might want to grab yourself a cup and fill it with some water since it is watercolors. The other thing would be you'll have this palette, comes with a paintbrush. It has a little plastic piece on it, just take that off. So you can open this up. This is part of the tray that you'll be using to mix your watercolors onto it. So right here. And then you'll have paper. You can use your sketchbook. If you have watercolor paper, in addition to the ones for class, you can use those as well. So this and a paper towel to dry off your paintbrush. You will have, if you have additional paintbrushes like the ones that were given in school, you can use these as well. They're up to you. So if we were trying to fill in a larger area, we might want to use a larger brush versus using the one that comes with the paintbrush or the paint set already. So you have two different options, or ones that have textures or look different than just a normal style paintbrush. So for this, we're going to look at some different approaches how to apply the watercolor and how to mix them into our palette. So first thing I'm going to do is use some of your water, put it into your palette, and then we're going to grab some of the color and apply it to our palette. So the color, the more water you have, the more transparent the paint will become. So as we add more paint, you can see it start to become more opaque. So if we apply this here, but if we apply the same color, but just add more water to it, becomes more of like a very light shade of green versus green with less water. So what you'll be using is mixing water with your color to make those color combinations. And then what you can do, so if you're trying to make a a color wheel, but you want to figure out that you needed more of like a blue, like a green yellow. So I'm going to clean off my brush because I don't want to move my green paint into my yellow ink. So I want to wash off my paintbrush. Now use clean water. Now I can use yellow and apply that. So I'm not dragging the green paint into it. I'm just using the yellow itself and mixing all the colors down here so the colors stay pure on the palette, so that if I needed to use yellow or green at a different time, that they are still their original colors. So now if I start to mix these, I can do it on here once I have enough color. So the color white on the palette might not come up on a tone that you're trying to apply to a piece of paper, but it would help if you're trying to make a gray or more of like a muted or like dull color of one that already exists. So I'm not sure if it'll be picking up on here, but there's a lot of colors are very close to each other. There's a few that are like dark purple, dark blue, like a magenta, and black, and this is like a brown. So just be mindful which ones you're picking, because some of them look very similar, but they once you apply water to them are going to look vastly different. So again, always want to mix your colors on the tray. That's why we have it here. It's attached. And then once you have the tray, then you add some of the color and you mix it onto the palette. If you mix the water onto the palette, like onto the actual color, it'll eventually become like really sticky, and it's harder. It becomes like gooey, and so it won't be as easy to paint with. So just keep that in mind if you're planning on making something along those lines. So here's some blue. One thing is that watercolors do pick up like where there's extra paint because they are semi-transparent. So you can start to see that there's different tones in the watercolor brush strokes. So be really mindful of what you're applying. And sometimes they bleed with the colors that are underneath, or they stay still, so you can be really specific. So this is not as blue as here because it's semi-transparent, so it's picking up the green that's underneath of it. So they apply the same way. So now these blue stripes are becoming a little bit more green because of the yellow that's underneath, the yellowish green that's underneath. If I just do a second coat of it, it becomes a little bit more opaque, like harder to see through. So just keep that in mind when you're working. More water you add to the paper, it's going to become less stable because it's starting to peel up. It's going to start to peel away. So, but you can do that. So you can apply water just to the paper itself. This especially works well on watercolor paper. So then now if I add water, so it'll start to like blend into the already existing like puddle of water. And if you're working wet into wet, so this is dry, wet into dry, being that the paper is dry and the paint is dry, or the paint is wet and the paper is dry. But you can use wet into wet, being that if you're mixing two groups of paint together, they'll blend together and make like a softer edge. So we can do a sample of that. Here's some of that yellow. Here's some of this blue. So they're blended. They're gonna be blending into each other. So you can sort of make like a transition. You can start to blend some of the color that already existed from the yellow into the newly added blue. So this is really important when you're working with your watercolors. Again, making sure you're using water, your palette, using the tray to add the water and your paint, and then applying it to your surface, which is like your sketchbook, watercolor paper, computer paper, whatever you're using at that time. Helps to have a paper towel, like just fold up a paper towel. You can use this a couple times just to clean off your brush. And dry off any area. And this is very helpful when you're cleaning up. So what you're going to do for the cleanup, you're going to just go through your palette and try to wipe out any extra color. You don't want the color to sit in there because then next time you add more water, it'll make whatever the new color, if you're putting yellow into the one that was blue, and the blue just stayed there and dried, it will now make that green. So you always want to clean out your tray every time, so that you have a clean surface area to work from. If you have questions, let me know.